What's going on, guys? It's Dave Haas here with the Rise Up Rich podcast number 13. We're getting down there. I've installed the habit now of recording a podcast every single Wednesday. Well, actually, I'm recording this on Tuesday, but it'll be released on Wednesday. So every single Wednesday, you can come to my podcast and get my content. Feel free to hit me up on Instagram, on Facebook, on my website, email me, contact me if there's any topics that you want me to cover, any things you're struggling with that I think I might be able to be of use to, where I can help you. And the thing is, about when we have problems, we tend to think that our problems are our own, but in actuality, we're all kind of suffering from similar problems. So when you have a problem, even though you think it's unique to yourself, by you asking for help with that problem, you're actually going to end up helping a lot of other people, because a lot of people are suffering from similar problems. I could pretty much put all of my clients in a box and say, these are the things that they're suffering from. Self-doubt, lack of confidence, fear of judgment of others, guilt, so it's like, these are commonalities between a lot of people. So don't think that your problems are your own. I think that's like a really, it makes you feel like not alone. We really start to think that when we face problems, they're like the biggest problems on earth and no one else is suffering from these problems. But there's a lot of people suffering from these problems. But better yet, there's a lot of people that have overcome these problems. And because they've overcome these problems, that means that it is in the field, in collective consciousness, for us to be able to overcome these problems. I talked about this in the last podcast, but I'll say it one more time because it's good to repeat things. That's how we learn, through repetition. But the guy that ran the 4-minute mile, I still don't know his name. I'm going to have to find that because I reference him all the time. But no one could break the 4-minute mile. They thought it was physically impossible for the human body to break the 4-minute mile. One guy breaks the 4-minute mile, then within weeks, multiple other runners begin to break the 4-minute mile. Why? Because it was in the field. It was in collective consciousness. The knowledge now existed for anyone to tap into and use to improve their own lives. So if you're suffering from something, be it guilt, be it self-doubt, be it the feeling of unworthiness, shame, whatever it may be, know that there's people that have already overcome and learned how to transcend those lower states of consciousness. And that power exists in the field, and we can learn how to tap into that so that we can get the help that we need to overcome any of our problems. So just with that knowledge that it's possible, it begins to change things. So today, what I wanted to really dig into is the levels of consciousness, or the scale of consciousness, as laid out by Dr. David Hawkins. Now, for those of you who don't know Dr. David Hawkins, I reference him often in all of my content, and he was my mentor's mentor. And so basically, I studied under Hawkins through my mentor. And David Hawkins was a clinical psychologist, and he had the largest clinical psychology practice in the United States. And he decided to give it all up to pursue enlightenment, basically. He moved to Sedona, and he just went down the road. He went on the journey to understand the purpose, why we're here on this earth, and tried to lay it out for us to be able to interpret. As I go through this scale, I have it here in front of me, and as I go through this scale, there's going to be levels in here that I can't describe to you because I'm not there yet. I never teach anybody anything unless I've already experienced it myself. I only want to teach from what I've experienced. I don't want to read something in a book, and this goes for anyone that's in the coaching field. It's like, I don't want to read something in a book and then try and teach it to my clients, or try and regurgitate it here on this podcast. I need to be able to experience it. That's how I do all of my talks, all of my speaking engagements. That's how I do every single one of these podcasts with no notes, because I've experienced it. So once you experience something, you just talk. You talk about your experience. You testify. So this is just like a really good tool for you to think about when you're teaching, or when you're coaching, or when you're trying to help somebody else. Don't try and help somebody else unless you've already experienced it. If you are 30 pounds overweight and you can't figure out how to lose weight, don't coach people on how to eat healthy, because you haven't figured it out on your own, right? You haven't tapped into that field yet. So what Hawkins did, and he did this in pretty much every single one of his books, but the book that I always suggest is Letting Go. which was his last book. But this is like the easiest book to read. Just reading that book is going to move you up the scale that I talk about. If you do nothing, you just read that book, you're going to move up the scale of consciousness. And we're going to talk about the benefits that come along with moving up the scale of consciousness. But that's what Rise Up Rich is all about. It's rise up. Rise up the scale of consciousness. Rise up rich in all areas of your life. Rise up rich in wealth, in health, in personal growth, in spiritual development. So in love, in peace and joy. It's like rich in all areas of life. Okay? And it's based around this scale. And what Hawkins did was he created a scale of consciousness where he laid out every single level of consciousness. And the scale goes from 0 to 1,000 and is logarithmic, meaning that every point that you go up is 10 times more powerful than the point that you were previously at. So just moving up 1 point will have a 10 times effect on your life. And this is what I teach my clients. And when they begin to experience these small little shifts, their life begins to change in profound ways because of the power of moving up this scale. Now, a lot of people get stuck just at one level their entire life. And the reason for that is because they lack the awareness. If you don't have awareness around what your problem is, you can't solve your problem. So the first step is always awareness. And this scale is creating that awareness for us. It's kind of like a GPS. It gives us a gauge on where we are and a gauge on where we're going to go. So a GPS is completely useless if you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going, right? So this is why this tool, this scale of consciousness, is so important. And I'm just going to go through it, and then we're going to talk about some of the uses that it has. So 0 being the very lowest, this would be like bacteria would be like at 0 or 1. And as you move up through the scale, you begin to experience different states of consciousness. So at the very bottom is shame. Now, shame is a big one, and it's a super low state of consciousness. When you're in the state of shame, you have no energy. You just have to put yourself in an experience where you've experienced shame before, and you know how low of an energy shame is. So when you're in the state of shame, it's like you don't really have the will to go on. Guilt is level 30. At level 30 in guilt, we're guilty about everything. If we don't stay to our diet, we're guilty. If we're not a good enough golfer, we're guilty. If we're not producing the way we had our expectations, we're guilty. It's not even so much about guilty in the sense of we committed a crime, let's say, and we're guilty of that. It's the guilt and the judgment that we place on ourselves. It's even more powerful than the guilt and the judgment of society. So we are constantly judging ourselves. And when we get trapped in the state of guilt, it's debilitating. As you move up, though, you go to apathy. And apathy, there's a little bit more energy for life, but it's still at level 50. And at level 50, in apathy, when apathetic is the victim, right? You are blaming everyone. You're taking no responsibility for your own actions. You have very, very little will to go on. It's kind of like the apathy mentality is, of course that happens to me. It's like just my luck, right? It's like life is against you, right? Life is a bitch. Life's a struggle. That's the state of apathy. Very low energy state. Grief at 75. You can get stuck in a state of grief for your entire life. So grief could be from the loss of a loved one. Grief could be from having a terrible childhood. Grief could be from the loss of innocence. Whatever it may be, but grief, let's just use it as like the loss of like a parent, for example, because I've experienced this because my mom passed away when I was 9 years old. So the grief that you experience from the loss of a parent, it could be held on to for like your entire life, right? So some people without dealing with grief properly will continue to stay in that state of grief for a long time. And without dealing with that grief, it begins to affect everything around you. It begins to affect your relationships. And this is why we see with like parents that lose children, they usually end up getting divorced because one of the two people in the relationships ends up staying in the state of grief. And if someone stays in the state of grief when someone else is trying to move on, it becomes it's like very debilitating, very like laborious when you're trying to constantly lift someone up out of grief, right? So the way through grief is to feel it, and this is the letting go process. But without recognizing that you're in grief, without being aware that you're still holding on to grief, that behavior can drive, that feeling, can drive all of your behaviors for your entire life. So grief is a really low one at 75. 100 is fear. This is big for so many people now. It's because we become so fearful of everything. Like right now, the coronavirus is out, and we're so fearful of the coronavirus. You go into airports, and people are walking around with masks, and all of a sudden, there's tension between China and the United States, and we're going to be in world war soon, and all these things. It's like we get so wrapped up in fear. But there's also fear of feeling feelings, right? There's the fear of fear itself. So this could be explained as the example of grief. It's like if you felt grief, if you experienced real, true grief with a dramatic loss, you understand how powerful that emotion is. It can bring you to your knees, right? That's how powerful the feeling of grief is. So we have fear of feeling that feeling. We have fear of feeling the feeling of shame. Part of my story is my whole entire life, I came to the awareness that I did everything. Every decision I ever made was to never feel the feeling of shame ever again. So you can see how these lower states of consciousness can just drive your entire behaviors, and they drive you on autopilot. You don't even realize that these programs, these feelings are creating who you truly are. I shouldn't say who you truly are, who you are today. But that's not the true you. The true you is somewhere clouded underneath all of these emotions and all these belief systems and programs. So what I do in my coaching is I help people remove all those programs, belief systems, help them identify what the feelings are and how to overcome them. Once you do that, you can begin to move out of these states of consciousness, right? You can get the energy back that you've been missing. So just keep going here. 125 is desire. And everyone says, oh, desire is good. You got to have desire to move forward. And the thing about desire is this, and I'm just going to keep this quick. When you desire something, you're ultimately saying that my life is not good enough right now, and I need to add something into my life in order to be happy. So when you can see how low of a state of energy and consciousness that is, just that mentality. My life isn't good. I need to add a new car in order to be happy. I need to get a boyfriend or girlfriend or a wife or a husband to be happy. I need to make $1 million in order to be happy. This is where I was trapped for a very, very long time in desire. It wasn't until I learned how to let go of that desire that everything that I ever wanted in my life began to flow into my life, and it was effortless. There was no hard work. There was no hustle. There was no grind. When I was in desire, that's all I did was hustle, grind, and work hard, and it didn't get me anywhere. So desire is a tough one because we believe if we let go of desire, we won't get what we want. There's a difference between wanting and attracting, manifesting into your life than from desire. Desire is fueling all of our behaviors. Desire is fueling everything. Whereas a wanting or a manifesting or a trying to attract, ultimately what we're saying is I still want to have nice things and I still want to get married and have children and whatever it may be, but it doesn't control my happiness. If it comes into my life, great. If it doesn't, great. Right? So there's a difference. Desire, without it being recognized, can put you on autopilot and make you do things that are not going to end up attracting what it is that you want into your life. As you move up, you go into 150, which is anger. I mean, this is like 80% of the population lives in the state of anger. We are angry at literally everything. We're angry at the government. We're angry at the weather. We're angry at the guy that cut us off on the road. It's just we're in a constant state of anger. And the reason that I know that anger is still so huge in our society is just look at the entertainment industry. Like, what are the movies that are doing the best? The movies about revenge, movies about vengeance, movies about killing, movies about the movies John Wick came to mind where he revenges his dead dog. It's like there's so much anger in this world. So recognizing that you are in the state of anger and learning how to overcome it. The good thing about anger, though, is that there's fuel in anger. When someone pisses you off, you're fired up, right? And that's the payoff that we're getting from this low state of consciousness is the energy. We get an energy boost when someone calls us stupid or that we can't do it. It makes us angry. It fuels us. Oh yeah, I can't do it. Watch, I'm going to go do it, right? So that's why people get addicted to anger, because there's so much fuel in it. But being angry all of the time is like driving your car down the expressway with your foot to the floor going 150 miles an hour 7 days a week, 24/7. If you stay in that state where you're tense, if you can imagine, I use this example, I think in the last podcast. So you're driving around, a NASCAR driver's driving around a racetrack. Every ounce of his being is solely focused. All his fast twitch muscles are 100% engaged to make sure that he doesn't crash into a wall. Okay? And this is what happens when we stay in the state of anger. We stay in this fight or flight mode all of the time. This is a big reason why heart disease, stroke, cancer, these kinds of things are huge, because if you run the body in this fight or flight mode all the time, eventually the body's like, I've had enough, right? I need a freaking rest. Heart attack, right? Stroke, cancer. It's like basically saying, hey, something's not right here. We need to figure out how to fix this. The thing about anger, of overcoming the state of anger, is actually relatively easy. You just have to feel the anger. And it's actually kind of fun. It's like, if you think of somebody that you're angry about, close your eyes, visualize anger. Visualize that anger coming out, right? Allow that anger to escape. So if you do this, you can just rate your level of anger towards a person, right? What's your level of anger? It's a 10. Okay, keep allowing it. Keep being with that anger, staying with that anger. Don't judge it. Don't rationalize it. Don't tell yourself like, I shouldn't be feeling this anger. No, just let the anger flow out of you. And I do this quietly in my own mind, right? Some people might do it, actually physically, where they're punching a pillow or punching a punching bag or going for a run or whatever it is. But the thing is, you got to stay connected to it. Don't let the mind wander away from the anger. Just stay with the anger. So in probably a 5-minute meditation, you can let go of very, very serious anger in about a 5-minute meditation. And one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I have a client right now that I'm having some trouble with, and I was just like, oh, this is exactly what she just needed to hear. It's like, anger is easy, right? Because it's already kind of high up on the scale of consciousness. 150, there's fuel there. But if you let go of that anger, you kind of take your foot off that gas. The body's able to relax. You begin to get to a state of flow. The next is pride. And, this is where a lot of people get stuck, I would say, in spiritual growth, because when things start to go really well, as you move up this scale, like what I said, this scale is moving up, every point is 10 times more powerful. I don't have the calculation, but if you go from 20 in shame to 175, you can imagine how much your life has improved. It is improved 1,000,000 times, right? Someone's gonna have to check my math on that, but your life has dramatically improved, right? So in pride, we become very boastful. Like, things are going well and we want to tell people about it, and we get connected to things going well. So the reason that pride is, there's vulnerability in pride, because when things start to go poorly, then all of that boasting that we've done, now we begin to look back and we start to worry about what people think. Oh, look, I was doing so good, now I'm not doing good. We also get into a state of fear that it's going to go away. So there's a lot of bad that's associated with pride. But I mean, again, at 175, you're in a good state. You're on the way. There's energy. There's the desire. No, I shouldn't use the word desire. There's the wanting to continue to move up the scale of consciousness. Things are going really good. You know what the next level is. You have awareness at the level of pride. You have the energy at the level of pride. So there are good things in pride, but that boastfulness, that payoff that we're getting when we are, boasting about how well we're doing, when people are saying, oh man, that's awesome. You post something on Facebook and be like, oh, you're doing so good. These are the things that we get addicted to. And when those things go away, it could end up sending us back down the scale of consciousness. So there's some vulnerability in pride. So all of those from 20 to 175 are all levels of force. So anything in this range, anything below the level of 200, life is a struggle. Life is hard. Life is against you. The world is against you. Nothing goes right. You're forcing your will on the universe. You basically are saying, I know what's best for me, and I'm going to make sure it happens, and I'm going to push everything I have to make sure it happens. And this would be at like the 125 to 175. In 2030, you've basically just given up, right? So just having the awareness that you can go from giving up to like lots of energy is really, really great. So in these levels below 200, it's in force. And this is what we want to get out of. That's why 200, the level of courage, is the most critical level of consciousness for us to get to, because in courage, we have we have the courage, we have the will to face all of these issues, to face our anger, to face the hurts and the traumas from our past. We have the courage to continue to move forward, to continue to move up the scale of consciousness. With that courage, it's just so much power, because we're no longer running from our fears. We're no longer running from our desires. We have the courage to face them and to feel them fully and to let them go. In courage, this is when the shift happens. And this is like a major shift that happens. This is when things begin to flow into your life. When I got to the level of courage, this is when everything began to flow into my life. It was like all the money that I ever had desired before, but now I let go of my desire, began to flow into my life effortlessly. I got married. I met the love of my life. We have a baby. It's like literally, it's just, I work like 5 hours a week at a business that makes me an amazing income. It's just all flowing. And even my coaching business, even this podcast, even my social media platforms, they're all just flowing and growing, and it's effortless. I don't feel like I'm working a single day in my life. So this is the power that exists when you get to the level of courage. You have the courage to face all your demons, to face your shadow. I talked a little bit about shadow before, but the shadow is that place, that dark side of us that we don't want anyone else to know about, right? So we have the courage to start facing that shadow and bringing it into the light and starting to let other people know what it is that we don't want other people to know about. And in that vulnerability, we have courage by being vulnerable. And by being vulnerable, we grow, okay? So the next level after courage is 250, which is neutrality. And this is a really tough one for a lot of people to get, because we get so addicted to our opinions. Our opinions mean so much to us, right? So we get attached to our opinions and our positions. But in neutrality, we have no opinions. We have no positions. So someone could say, like I always use the example, I'm a vegetarian, and if someone's a meat eater, before I used to defend that I was like, this is why I'm a vegetarian. This is why you're bad for being a meat eater, right? But in neutrality, I'm like, nah, you know what? I understand. I respect your opinion. I'm open to receiving the information about your opinion, but this is the way I feel, and this is what I want to do. There is no back and forth. There is no fighting fire with fire. It's like when someone asks me why you're a vegetarian now, I say, because that's what I love to do. What does anyone have to say back to you about that, right? So it's this neutralness, which reduces any attachment to positions, attachments to the conflicts, to anger, to feel that you're feeling in neutrality. Willingness is 310, and this is basically you're just willing to help, you're willing to grow, you're willing to be open-minded. It's just a state of like when someone says, hey, can you help me with this? Yes, I can, right? It's just like, I'm willing to allow, this is more what it's about. I'm willing to allow the universe to bring into my life everything that is in the highest good for me and in the highest good for humanity. Willingness. It's a really amazing place to be. At 350 is acceptance, okay? And acceptance is this is one that I really had to work on, is because as you begin to move up the scale of consciousness, you begin to create a spiritual ego. So all of a sudden you start to recognize when people are at lower states, and you begin to say you begin to say in your head, in your mind, that they're not as good as a person as you are. But we have to move to this next level of acceptance, because we have to have acceptance for where everyone is at in their life. You were once in the state of anger if you've grown. And now you have to have acceptance for this is where that person is on their journey. And you can't judge them for that. You can't look down on that. You just have to have acceptance. So that was a big one. As we move up, the next levels, I'm not going to go into too much because I don't really feel like I've experienced them enough, okay, for me to go into them in depth. But 400 is reason, 500 is love, and this isn't like romantic love. This is unconditional love. This is like love that has no limits. It's so powerful. It's all knowing. It's all present. It's everywhere. And we just have to be willing to open up the door to experience that love. Okay? So love is like it's like your dog. Love is, you can understand unconditional love better for a pet than you can for people, which is kind of hilarious. But your dog can do no wrong. It's like it can shit on the floor 5 minutes later. You love that dog to death, right? That's unconditional love, right? So it's like if you're married and your wife, and you love your wife unconditionally, and she cheats on you, you still love her unconditionally. That is unconditional love. There are no conditions to the way that you love her. All right, so that's love that we're talking about here, not romantic love. At 540 is joy, and just experiencing joy. You know, like I really have been really trying to connect to joy rather than happiness, because happiness is usually result based, right? I get this, I'm happy. I achieve this, I'm happy. But joy is a state that you're in all the time. And that's what I'm striving for every day. I want to be in a state of joy every time. And I've asked this question, and I've had a friend of mine ask this question. It's like, how many people do you know that are living in a constant state of joy? And it's like, no one, right? Just no one. So that's what I'm striving for always, is to connect to the state of joy, feel the power in it, recognize it, become aware of it, and try and produce more of that in my life, okay? Peace is at level 600, and if you can experience one moment of real, true peace, and this isn't the peace like, oh, I'm at peace. No, this is like the most powerful level of peace. If you can experience 1 minute of that, it could heal all the diseases, all the illnesses that you have in your body, right? This is how powerful this is, right? And then from 700 to 1,000 is enlightenment, and the only people to really get to levels of enlightenment are like the great avatars of our time, Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, Hawkins. You know, I would probably say that he was enlightened as well. And in the state of enlightenment, this is, I mean, how I describe it. You can basically make the decision at that point whether you want to stay in the human form or you want to go on to the next realm, right, into the spiritual realm. Hawkins, I think when he achieved enlightenment, he basically realized he had to come back down into like lower states like of peace and joy to be able to teach this scale of consciousness to us that have not experienced it. So that was his gift that he gave to humanity, was this scale of consciousness. And like I said, this is our GPS. This will help you identify. When you read the book Letting Go, which you're going to do, when you read the book Letting Go, you're going to be able to really get clear. I'm like, this is me. Like when you're reading anger, you're like, that's who I am, right? So that's great when you identify where you're at. But don't worry so much about where you are. It's like, okay, where are we going? And he has another book called Transcending the Levels of Consciousness, which is kind of like giving you a guide on how you can move up this scale, right? And moving up this scale, like I said, just 1 point can have a 10 times effect on your life. So that's why this is so important. This is why all of my coaching, all of my teachings are all based around this. How can I help people move up this scale of consciousness so they can experience, you know, the joy, the peace, and the love, the gratitude, the abundance, all of those things that I have experienced for myself firsthand. So that is the scale of consciousness. I'm going to wrap it up there. I have a coaching client coming in, so I need to wrap it up. But I thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Don't forget, though, I am still accepting one-on-one clients. If you are interested in a coaching program, then hit me up on Instagram at David F. Haas, or on my Facebook page, which is David F. Haas as well. But also my website, davidhaas.ca. No F in the website, davidhaas.ca. And hit me up with some questions. I mean, I'd love to dig deep into some actual problems, get some people on here that I can do like a live coaching. I think that would be really cool as well. Thanks for taking the time, and tune in next Wednesday for the next episode.